431. And we're going to finish chapter 15. We actually spent 2 days on this.
We're going to Biology Wednesday?
Yeah, let's see if that's right.
Wait, you already have an assessment?
Biology Wednesday, test Thursday.
Wait, bro. I'm not gonna be here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. Did I see you after class, or did I see you like your house?
We don't have school on Wednesday next week.
Monday and Tuesday. Shit.
Yeah, you can come see me, whatever you want
I'm
to
not
talk
gonna
about.
be here on that Tuesday.
We're not gonna be here Wednesday.
Because we're out for
I'm not coming to
Thanksgiving.
school ever again.
We're out for
Oh,
Thanksgiving.
it starts Thanksgiving next Wednesday?
Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
Okay,
Do we come to school
I
Wednesday?
think Wednesday night.
page 431. This starts our discussion on what we call Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. Now, use some of these magnets here so I can write. Here we see a population, a small population of owls. 2 gray owls and 1 red owl. Over time, the numbers of a population can change. Here, the next generation, the population has doubled. But you can see there's the same amount of red owls and gray owls. The population is 1/3 red and 2/3 gray. So that hasn't changed here. So we say that this population, we say that it's in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. Hardy and Weinberg were 2 famous geneticists, statistical geneticists. And they did a lot of mathematical work showing how evolution occurs and why. I'm going to have you skip the math, which, if you don't like math, that's a good thing. And if you love math, you can still read it. It's in your book on page 432. Do you see at the top where it says connection to math?
Yes, I do.
And then there's 1, 2, 3 paragraphs.
Yes, I do.
And then it says conditions. You don't have to worry about the connection to math part. So you want to make a note. You might want to make a note about that. That we're gonna skip that part. We do it in AP Bio. So if you take AP Bio when you're a senior, we'll spend a whole day studying that. No, you have to take chemistry before you take AP Bio. Yepers. So anyway, Hardy-Weinberg said that the population, this is basically an unchanging population. It hasn't evolved any. If evolution means change. So if this stays 1/3 red over time, it's in what we call Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. And Hardy and Weinberg said that a population will not evolve, will not change, as long as 5 things do not happen. No genetic drift. Number 1. And we'll talk about each of these. No gene flow. No mutation. What else is it? No selection. Oh, sorry. Non-random mating. I'll put no non-random mating. I don't know if that makes sense. And no selection. So, Hardy and Weinberg are saying the population will not, these are the conditions that must be met for evolution not to happen. The population is going to change, is going to evolve if any of these conditions are not met. There can't be any genetic drift. There can't be any gene flow. There can't be any mutation. There can't be any... The mating has to be random is what this means. And there can't be any selection. So over the next day or so, I'm going to explain what each of these things
So
is.
if all those things happen, then they will evolve or they won't evolve?
If these conditions are met, if there's no genetic drift, if there's no gene flow, if there's no mutation, then the population will not change. It's going to stay in Harding-Weinberg equilibrium. There won't be any evolution. Okay? But we'll see. This rarely happens where all these conditions are met. Usually, something is violated. Okay? So let's start with genetic drift. Let me show you what genetic drift is.
Oh, yeah.
Genetic drift is a term we use for random things that happen in a population that can change the population. Some accident where, and often this happens a lot in nature. Maybe there's a big forest fire or a flood or like the meteor hit that killed all the dinosaurs. Remember that? Some kind of event happens where only a lucky few survive. You could imagine a forest fire coming through and killing most of the population, but only a lucky few happen to survive. Why? Just because they were lucky. We call that a bottlenecking event. And to help explain a bottlenecking event, here we have a jar of marbles, many different variations. We just pour a few marbles out of the jar. That's called a bottlenecking event. And that's like a forest fire that killed almost the whole population, and we just end up with a few surviving. Now, if these few mate with one another and the population grows back to its original size, the population is going to be different. It's going to be all blue and white. Because we've lost the reds and the tans and whatever, any other colors, because only a few survived. That's called a bottlenecking event. And it changes, the book talks about cheetahs, how cheetahs used to have these huge numbers, and there was some bottlenecking event, and now there's only a few. All the cheetahs in the world are very similar because they came from a small population of cheetahs that survived some bottlenecking event. Think about, there's only a small population of manatees left. Did you know that? You all know what manatees are?
Yeah.
Endangered species.
Yeah, I swam.
Imagine that there's only 100 manatees left. And there's only 3 of them, let's pretend, out of that 100 with a certain types of white spots on their back. And let's say that those 3 just happen to die. Some boats run into them or something. That's usually how manatees die. Well, all of a sudden you've lost the genes for spots on the back. And if the 97 that are left reproduce and grow back into large numbers, there still won't be any manatees with spots on their back because those genes were lost through an accident. And so all of the manatees in the world will resemble the small amount that had survived this time where the manatees were significantly reduced in number. Look at this. This is these are the Amish, the Pennsylvania Amish. And if you look at the population of Pennsylvania Amish, you see a bunch of them with extra fingers and toes. Count the number of fingers here.
Whoa.
6.
1, 2, 3,
Why?
4, 5, 6.
My aunt had an extra.
And look at the toes. Same thing.
What?
I knew a kid with 11
I think there's extra toes there. It doesn't. Yeah, I think there's.
I know a kid with 11 fingers should get cut off.
Oh yeah.
Why did I mention it?
Sam Morton's a kid with an extra.
Now, extra fingers and toes is a disorder called polydactyly. And it's only present in the population, the allele is only present something like 1 in 5,000 individuals. But in the Amish, Pennsylvania Amish, it's like 1 in 15. Why is that? Well, it's because the founding Pennsylvania Amish was just a few people, just a small group, and a few of them had polydactyly. And so when they have kids with one another, and their kids have kids with one another,
Punnett squares.
the gene stays in that group. And so if one in just a few of the starting Pennsylvania Amish, see, Pennsylvania Amish only have babies with other Pennsylvania Amish. So if just a few of the starting Pennsylvania Amish had that gene, then it'll be seen in the population of Pennsylvania Amish today in very high numbers. That's an example of genetic drift, or the bottleneck effect. Imagine this. Bunch of frogs. Something happens where all the frogs die except these light green ones. Those two reproduce and make a whole new population. Look how different the new population is than the old one. That's a bottlenecking effect. That's genetic drift. And we see genetic drift will change a population. So if a population is going to stay the same, you have to have no genetic drift. Yes?
What kind of event would be a bottlenecking effect?
Well, a forest fire, a big flood, a meteor hits the earth and kills almost all of a population except for just a couple. I'll give you another example. Big storm. Listen, big storm happens, floodwaters come up. What do you do if you're a frog and it's flooding? You jump on a log that's floating. The log floats away and lands on an island somewhere. Only 2 frogs were on the log. Those 2. The island doesn't have any predators. The frog can reproduce like crazy on the island. Guess what the population of frogs on the island is going to look like? It's going to look like the 2 that made it there. You see what I'm saying? And so you'll have an island full of this kind of frog. Because those 2 were the founders of the population. So it's called the founder effect, is what we call that. When just a few individuals start a whole population, the whole population later is going to be very similar to the 2 that started. Isn't that cool? That's an example of genetic drift.
Well, we all got down
What's that?
I figured out.
Okay. So that's genetic drift. Let me explain some of these other ones. I don't have any pictures of a couple of these. You can't have any gene flow if you're going to stay in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. Gene flow is when organisms move into a population or leave a population. Let's say let me go back to the frog example. Let's say we had a bunch of purple frogs leave this population. Would our population change if that happened?
Yep.
Yes. What if we had a bunch of dark green frogs enter the population? Would that change our population? Absolutely. That's gene flow. Gene flow is organisms coming into a population or leaving a population. So you can't have any gene flow if you're going to stay in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. We've talked about mutation already. What if a mutation happens where these green frogs have a purple frog as a baby? Is that going to change the population any?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It adds some genes that have never been there. So populations will change if mutation happens. So to stay the same, you can't have any mutation. What about non-random mating? What if it's desirable for frogs? What if the purple gene is desirable? And purple is beautiful for frogs, and green is ugly. Well, everything's going to try to mate with the purples, and the purples are only going to mate with themselves, and over time you'll see the whole population becoming more purple. We call that sexual selection. Your book talks about it. And that's an example of non-random mating. Random mating is just mating with anybody, not caring who they are. And you don't see it much in the animals because animals can see and choose based on certain aspects. And so if you have non-random mating, you'll get change in your population. Hardy-Weinberg saw that. And so let's talk about selection. There's 3 types of selection we're going to study. Stabilizing selection, directional selection, and what's the other one called? Disruptive selection. Let me talk about directional selection first. Here is a population of organisms represented by a bell curve. The original population is here on the dotted line. After selection occurs, the bell curve has moved. This is basically showing you a distribution of organisms. Let's say a distribution of organisms in size. Let's say this is the medium size of individuals. And there are a few small individuals, a few tall individuals, but most of them are middle-sized. But here we've taken this population and we've graphed them again after many years, and we see that the bell curve has moved over. What does that say about the population?
Gotten taller.
They've gotten bigger. That's correct. This is what we call a directional selection. Something in nature is selecting the taller individuals. This is what happened with the giraffe evolution. The shorter ones died, the taller ones survived, and that moved our bell curve to the right, meaning in a taller direction. If we take a look, I'll come back to these moths because they're important. If we take a look at horse evolution, 30 million years ago, this was the graph of horse size. Left being small size, right being big size. Most horses were small. We called them Herocotheriums. It was a horse about the size of a dog. That's how big horses were. How do we know that? We found lots of fossils of them. What's that?
A German Shepherd dog or like a Chihuahua?
But no, more like a German Shepherd. Not a Chihuahua. That would be cute though. And then, for some reason, and the reason is that the forest that horses live started changing into grassland, this curve got moved to the right, which means body size got bigger. And then 20 million more years, the curve moves more to the right. Body size got even bigger. So body size in horses has been increasing over the past 60 or about 40, 50 million years.
In about another 30 million years, are you going to be bigger?
Could be. Could be. If the bigger ones are surviving better than the smaller ones, they'll keep getting bigger. Are the bigger ones surviving better than the smaller ones right now?
No, maybe.
I don't know.
You're in a little miniature horse farm. It's so cute.
Do they do okay, the miniatures?
I don't know. I just drive by them.
They're really expensive though, because they don't have.
But they're adorable.
Let's take a look at the moths, because this was a famous experiment, or a famous study that was done. These are called peppered moths, and the book talks about these things. Peppered moths come in different colors. They come in dark, and they come in spotted. And these things existed in an area of England, and here they're shown on the bark of a tree, and you can see all this lichen on the tree. And there was a group of scientists studying them. And they found that in this area, there were a lot of white-colored ones, and not many black-colored ones. Can you guess why?
You can see the black ones better.
The black ones you can see, and why does that hurt them?
Because
they're eaten by birds. Birds eat those, and they don't see those. So these things all die out, and these things survive. And something like 96% of the population looked like this, and only something like 4% of the population looked like that. They had set up all these little traps to capture these moths. But what they found out was some industry moved to the area and started churning out a bunch of pollutants. And the pollutants killed the lichens, the white lichens that were on the trees, and exposed the dark bark below. And so then you had this situation where the bark was dark and the dark ones blended in and the light ones really stuck out. Birds ate the light-colored moths, couldn't see the dark-colored moths, so didn't eat many of them. And all of a sudden the population was full of dark moths. And something like 96% of the moths became dark over just a short period of time. And then, guess what happened when the law was passed that you couldn't just due out smoke, you had to put filters over your stacks.
Black goes bad again.
It went back. The lichens came back. See, there's a little lichen there, but it's not doing too well. The lichen grows back. The light ones again are favored. So that's an example of population changing. It's an often used example to talk about evolution. The peppered moth is what we call it. Your book talks about that. So that's an example of directional selection. Selection that moves a curve in one certain way. There's two other types of selection you have to know about. This next one's called stabilizing selection. We start out with our original population as kind of a spread. Some short individuals, some tall individuals. But it turns out that the short ones and tall ones don't do well, and only the medium-sized ones do well. And we end up with a curve that's very skinny and very tall instead of spread out. We call that stabilizing selection. I'll give you an example. Wheat in a field. Have you ever noticed wheat in a field is all about the same height? Or trees in a forest, they're all about the same height. If you're a tree in a forest, what's wrong with you if you're real tall?
You get hit by a plane. You're exposed to the elements.
By a plane, probably not that often, but you're on the right track.
Elements, it's possible.
Wind will tip you over.
Hit by the wind. Yeah, the wind, you're really exposed if you're taller than everyone else. You're liable to get hit by lightning, you're liable to get hit by wind, you're liable to get hit by a plane, but you know, that could happen. Yeah, that could happen. What happens if you're a tree that's too short?
You don't get any light.
You don't get enough light. So all the trees grow about the same size. That's stabilizing selection. There's another type of selection. Oh, and they talk about this bird's clutch size. This bird always lays 4 to 5 eggs. So it's got a real skinny curve of clutch size. It never lays only 1 or 2 eggs. What happens if you only lay 1 or 2 eggs? You got a problem?
Yeah.
They could get eaten, killed by predators, rats or something, crawl out there and eat the eggs. Nature's tough. What if you lay 10 eggs? What's the problem then?
You can't feed them all.
You can't feed all your kids. So you almost always see 4 or 5 eggs. That's stabilizing selection. And the final type of selection, we call disruptive selection. Here's the original curve. Only the tall ones survive, and only the short ones survive. The medium ones all die for some reason or the other. And we form 2 different populations, a tall population and a short population. I can't think of an example where that actually happens with size. I'm sure there are some. But the book talks about it happening with color. You have these snails that have a range of colors. Dark colored shells and light colored shells. And medium colored shells. But the medium ones all die out. The dark colored ones survive in the forest where the dirt is dark. And the light colored survive near the beach where the sand is light. And you almost have no place that the in-betweens survive well. And so you end up with 2 populations, a population of dark-shelled and a population of light-striped shell. British land snails is what we call these.
Are those poisonous, the light ones?
I don't think either of them are poisonous.
Have you ever eaten snails?
Since light colors are always poisonous.
I have eaten snails. Escargot.
Is it gross?
No, it's good.
I stepped on a snail today getting out of the car.
So listen, I want you guys to read through tonight, through page 436. And then I'll talk about, start on 437 and finish that tomorrow. And I want to start on this video. So, Anthony, you can sign out.
What's up?
Will us out.
Well, it's